We're back for Canto VII of Dante's Inferno as we move through our own journey with Dante. And I want to go back a little bit and pick up where we were in Canto VI as we looked at the land of the gluttons, and we saw these figures that were being pelted by an icy rainstorm, an unrelenting storm, as they found themselves mired in kind of this muck that was there. The landscape will continue, and that's one point that I want to move you to as you read and do your own reading of Dante, is to remember that much of what Dante sets out in the geography of hell is supposed to help us understand the idea of his vision of the afterlife. The sinners in hell are stuck in landscapes that contribute to their own punishment. And so as we move downward in hell, you notice that there's a heaviness in the punishment, there's a heaviness in the feel, in the language that's here, as opposed to the lightness that we'll see when we get into parts of Purgatorio and parts of Paradiso. And I think it's not by mistake that Dante does this. The sinners within the Inferno are often bogged down by the weight of their sins and their past and their inability to let go of those things. And so the idea of being stuck in mud where your movement is restricted and you're forced to confront your sin is something I think we'll see again and again as we kind of make our journey through these different circles of hell. In today's canto, we're going to encounter the idea of wealth and how wealth can lead as a type of gluttony almost. It's again a sin of incontinence, it's a lack of self-control, it's an inability to control this kind of id impulse that we have within us. But we're moving further and further away from incontinence into violence. And so as you'll see, people begin to use their sins and they start to turn them away from themselves and they start to begin to affect other people, which is what we're going to get as we move further into hell. So when Dante gets to this region, and I'll read it in just a little bit, you'll notice that the first thing he sees is another guardian of the underworld, and that would be Pluto, who is the god of wealth. And he's a very imposing figure. If you look to your screen, you'll see some graphic images or depictions of what Pluto, the god of wealth, looks like. And as all these guardians are, they are upset that Dante has invaded their space, this living human, and he's interrupted their torture of these sinners, these shaves, these souls of these sinners. And so he too will call out and grumble at Dante a little bit. And then Virgil has to step in and kind of intervene as we go through there. So let me read just a little bit, and then you'll look at some of the images that are surrounding. We'll have a little talk about what's going on with that. Pape Satan, Alepe. The voice of Plutus clucked these words at us, and that kind sage to whom all things were known said reassuringly, "Do not let fear defeat you, for whatever be his power, he cannot stop our journey down this rock." Then he cried toward that swollen face of rage, crying, "Be quiet, cursed wolf of hell, feeding on the burning bile that rots your guts. This journey to the depths does have a reason, for it is willed on high, where Michael wrought a just revenge for the bold assault on God. As sails, swollen by wind when the ship's mast breaks, collapse, deflated, tangled in a heap, just so the savage beast fell to the ground." So it's interesting here that Virgil alludes to a time when Michael made war against the angels, like Lucifer and his band in heaven, and cast them out. And what we have is this secondary world that's created that man finds himself a part of. So it's a world aside from the paradise that should be the norm for people. Instead, they created this kind of corrupted system after the fall, not the fall of Adam and Eve, but the fall of Lucifer from godly grace. And so he reminds him, he says that this is preordained. There's a reason why Dante is here. Right. And then Dante looks about him, and he makes another reference to mythology. And he says, "And then we started down a fourth abyss, making our way along the dismal slope where the evil of the world is dumped. Ah, God's avenging justice, who could heap up suffering and pain as strange as I saw here? How can we let our guilt bring us to this? As every wave Charybdis whirls to sea comes crashing against its countercurrent wave, so these folks here must dance their rondelay." And so Dante describes the image of Scylla and Charybdis, these mythic beasts that we meet in the Odyssey, who are out in the middle of the ocean just churning and waiting for sailors to come to them so they can trap them in this cyclone or trap them in this current that will gobble them up and pull them down desperately. And this too is what Dante sees, this round motion, okay, this circular motion. He notices these sinners who are carrying these great weights, and they're like angry with each other, and they're walking in like a circle. As they circle one another, they curse one another. And Dante's like, what the heck is going on here? All right, so let's describe it a little bit. More shades were here than anywhere above, and from both sides, to the sound of their own screams, straining their chests, they rolled enormous weights. And when they met and clashed against each other, they turned to push the other away, one side screaming, "Why hoard?" The other side, "Why waste?" And so they moved back around the gloomy circle, returning on both sides to opposite poles to scream at their shameful tomb another time. Again they came to clash and turn and roll, forever in their semicircle joust. And I, my heart pierced through by such a sight, spoke out, "My master," he's talking to Virgil here, "please explain to me, who are these people here? Why are they all priests, these tonsured souls I see that are to our left?" And he said, "In their first life, as you will see here, they had some myopic minds they could not judge with moderation when it came to spending." So this is the land of the spendthrifts and the misers, the people who can't control their appetite for spending, as well as those who fail to spend, but they hoard all of their money, and they yell, they're in constant battle. There's anger here. This is a region that's highly populated, and Dante says so many of them have this tonsure, this beanie kind of cut in their head, which is the sign of being a monk or a priest. A lock, a tonsure, a piece of their hair has been taken and removed. And Dante's here using a little bit of satire because he's poking fun at the corruption that the church was experiencing in this day as they sold things like indulgences and pardons for people's sins, where for the right price you could get out of a little bit this. You see this again when you read Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales, this kind of satirical look at what the church was becoming. And so it's not by accident that Dante populates this realm of hell, this circle of hell, with a lot of these priestly figures. So we're going to skip a little bit and go down. And he speaks again to Virgil. "Master, in such a group as these, I should be able to recognize a few who dirtied themselves by such a crime as these." And he replied, "Yours is an empty hope. Their undistinguished life that made them foul now makes it harder to distinguish them." And this is a huge point in Dante. He says, I should know some of these people because I knew people who were greedy and people who were miserly and spendthrifts. And Virgil says, no, their sin has so far corrupted them that they are indistinguishable. Their sin of money, putting money primary before everything else, made them indistinguishable in life. There was nothing special about them. Anyone can worship money, and that's why avarice, greed, as well as this love of money is a very dangerous sin for Dante, particularly when you consider as a pilgrim he had everything like taken away from him. All of his worldly stature, all of his wealth, all of his land holdings were removed when he was banished and exiled from Florence, his home city. Okay. And then he begins to take a discussion. And so we turn a little bit from these miserly, and Dante wants to know, it's like, what about fortune? I hear of this woman Fortune, this lady Luck. Who is she? Where is she? What is she? And Virgil's going to try to explain it. You see, my son, the short-lived mockery of all the wealth that is in Fortune's keep, over which the human race is bickering. For all the gold that is or ever was beneath the moon won't buy a moment's rest for even one of these among these weary souls. And so he asked Virgil to tell him, who is Fortune? Now, Fortune was a creation by God. She's almost divine. She manages like the fate of these people, which didn't need to be managed if we had not had that battle with Lucifer in the beginning. Remember, we talked about the earth or the universe splitting into two camps as Michael and his band of angels for God fought against Lucifer and his band, and ultimately God triumphed, but the triumph came at a cost. It opened the door for Lucifer, for the devil to have influence on humans as they became God's chosen creation. And so he talks about fortune being one of these forces created by God. And fortune basically has this giant wheel, and she's depicted many ways. For Dante, she controls this wheel where she gives, and so you find yourself on the right side of fortune. But as she is lining your pockets with good will and good intent and good wealth, she is taking it away from someone else. So for you to do well means it comes at a cost for your neighbor. That's why wealth and the hoarding of money, the worship of money, or mammon as the Bible calls it, is such a dangerous thing, is because it takes your focus away from your neighbor, away from the community, and onto yourself. That's why these are the sins of incontinence, and that's why the people in hell are in hell. As you move forward to purgatory, what you'll notice with the sinners is that they don't have their primary focus on themselves. Their focus is outward rather than inward. And so when you think about, what happens to people when you look at their sin, your sin is going to be wrapped up very much in the thing that you love, okay? But it's a perverse version of love. In order to be able to conquer someone like fortune, you have to be able to give up the weight of things. To beat fortune, you have to not care about money. And if you can manage that, if you can manage not caring about wealth and making that central to your life, fortune has no sway over you. She cannot put you on the rack, so to speak. And this is the message Dante is kind of making clear here, is that money will do you no good in the afterlife. Okay? What does you good in the afterlife is the notion that you are part of this large assembly of people, and that to give outward rather than to just take in inward, to become more of a lever mentality than a taker mentality, that's what gets you through to paradise. And so it's an interesting canto. It's again a reminder canto as we move slower. Dante encounters other creatures there. Mixed up, he sees these this muck of mud, and he says, who are these people in here? And he notices that it's a swamp, okay, and that is the river Styx that they're approaching, the second boundary of hell. And in this region, he notices that there are people like coming to the surface and bubbles popping up. And he says, who are these people? They seem to like move so slowly. They're stuck in this swamp-like quicksand. And he says, this is where the slothful or the sluggish reign. You can't actually see them because the slothful are buried, because they're lazy in life, they're buried beneath the muck, and you only see the bubbles escape for them. They smolder in their hearts. Okay? And he says, bogged in this slime, they say, sluggish we were, and the sweet air made happy by the sun, and the smoke of sloth was smoldering in our hearts. Now we lie sluggish here in the black muck. This is the hymn that gurgles in their throats, but cannot sing in words that truly sound. They making a wider arc, we walked around the pond between the dry bank and the slime, our eyes fixed on those who gobbled mud. We came in time to the foot of a high tower. And this is where we will leave Canto VII and leave these people who are hoarding money, these angry people who yell at one another, and the sluggish and the slothful, and we'll enter into Canto VIII, where we cross the river Styx and we meet the new ferryman who will yield us to the other side, to the city of Dis, which is the devil's city. And that we'll save for next time.